Hello. Like she said, my name is Kyle Turner. I am newer to the Wausau area, and I'm originally from Houston, Texas, is where I grew up, and I've lived a bit around the other parts of Texas, and also a brief stint in Canada. And recently moved here as my partner lives in Wausau and is originally from the county area. So very excited to be in Wausau, especially in the summertime where it's 20 to 30 degrees cooler than Texas. So that's always nice. I was very excited when this opening on Transit Commission came up, just because transit has always been a part of my life. When I left for college, I did so without a car to a new city, and transit is how I got around, another country in Canada. And so I'm very passionate about it. I've either had no car or used a car lightly, and currently here in Wausau, me and my partner, we are a one-car household, so even still here, relying on transit a lot of days. So I'm very excited to be a part of this community and to take a look at what we can do.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you. Number 2 is approval of minutes from the May 19th, 2022 meeting. Minutes are in your packet. Any concerns, questions? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to accept.
I'll motion.
Thank you. Motion by Lukens,
I'll second.
second by Kathy. All in favor say aye. Aye. I'm aye as well. That passes unanimously. Number 3, discussion of possible action on Metroride drug and alcohol testing policy.
In your packet is a,
I think you
I think it's on, actually. In your packet is a Metroride drug and alcohol testing policy. As I stated in the memo, there are only a few minor things that are changing in here. We realize that there is a procedure regarding a long-term absence of an employee that is required of our policy, but when it came up recently, we realized it's not in the policy. And it's come up several times, and so we decided to put it in. It's not required to be in the policy, but for our own benefit, we wanted it in black and white. And so, we added that single phrase, and then we have the date of adoption, the date that the policy was modified on the last page, and then near the very end, it refers to contact people regarding the program. And it used to list our former operations manager, Peter Burek, and now it will list our new operations manager, Megan Newman. And those are the only changes. But I felt if you're going to adopt the policy, you should have the whole policy in front of you. So that's it in a nutshell. Any questions?
Okay. Yeah. Seeing none, you need action on that to accept?
Yep.
Okay, so I need a motion to accept that new policy?
I move to accept
Thank
the
you.
policy.
Thank you, Mr. Kisselman. Second? Second by Kyle Turner. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Passes unanimously. Discussion of possible action on the Free Fair Day sponsorship for November election.
So we were approached by the Marathon County Labor Council. They would like to provide us an amount to cover our daily revenue so that passengers can ride free. They'd like to do it on the day of the general election in November. They did this once previously in 2018, I believe. And it's a pretty straightforward proposal, and I was inclined to approve it on my own, but I thought in this day and age, I better run it past the Transit Commission. So it's entirely up to you.
Go ahead.
I just had one question on how they would be promoting it, or would Metroride be handling advertising this Free Fair Day?
We will merely be promoting that it's a free fair day. I had that discussion with the Labor Council yesterday. We're going to say sponsored by the Marathon County Labor Council, and that's it. Now, they may choose to promote it in a different way. That's up to them.
Question, do our bus routes, I'm just trying to go through my head, the bus routes cover pretty much of the polling places thinking Grand Avenue,
Yeah, we
good part.
provide reasonably good coverage.
close,
Yeah.
at least pretty close. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're not doing any extra service. We're not extending our hours. It's just our normal services. You just won't pay a fare.
Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion to accept. Go ahead.
I'll motion to accept. I really like this.
Thank you.
I'll second it, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, with a motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Discussion of possible action on collective bargaining agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union.
Just to be clear, there is no action necessary on this item. It's already been approved. I intended to provide this to you in closed session at the previous meeting, but we didn't have a quorum. I just wanted you to know what was in the agreement before it was officially approved, but I didn't have that opportunity. So now that it has gone before the HR committee and the Common Council, it is publicly available, and so we can talk about what's in it. So it's a 2-year agreement. The real substantive changes to the agreement have to do with money. And the changes we made financially have to do with attracting folks to the position in the first place and then to retain them. And so the very bottom, the Appendix A, are really the meat of this tentative agreement. So we've agreed to the step increases that you see there. 2% mid-year this year, 1.5% early next year, mid-year next year, 1.5%, and then at the end of next year, leading into the next contract, a 1.5%. Additionally, there was criticism that we're not doing enough to retain existing employees, so we added another step in the progression. Currently, it takes 2 years to get to what Step D, which is the 4th step. We added a Step E, which is at the 4-year mark, and it's 3% above the current top end. So the COLAs will apply to all of the steps. The rest is, I'll just go down the list. Let's see here. We changed the date of the agreement. We added some language to the grievance procedure. We recently had a grievance settlement, and there was a lack of clarity on some of the steps in the grievance procedure. What does it mean that it's submitted? You know, is it via email or is it not? Those sorts of things. The prior language was pretty wide open. Times have changed since it was written, and we wanted to clarify what was acceptable between the parties. Holidays, New Year's Eve has not been a holiday for transit folks. It is for the rest, so we've added that. Since Act 10 was passed and language was pulled entirely out of our agreement, there has been a great deal of confusion as to how to administer leaves. And there has been some discrepancy among the various leaves, whether it's personal holidays or vacation, sick leave, perfect attendance leave. And so our goal in this was to come up with language that was consistent for all of those leaves. What is a day for part-time? What is a day for full-time? And that sort of thing. And so that's what we've done. So we've done that for holidays, vacations, sick leave, perfect attendance leave. For bereavement leave, frankly, times have changed. Not everyone has a funeral, and that was particularly true during COVID. And the prior language, in fact, if you didn't actually have a funeral, one of the 3 days you were entitled to involved the funeral day. So if you had a funeral on a Saturday, or you didn't happen to have an actual funeral, you were down to 2 days. And so we changed it to bereavement leave. We made it clear that for, relatives, it's 3 days. For more distant relatives, it's fewer days. But anyway, it's clear, and it's now bereavement. We had added language to when the schedule is posted, which happens to be when we always post it, so it's not a change, it's just in the labor agreement now. We added a language regarding a Fed Med card. We require it, and there's been some confusion as to, when it occurs, and given the shorthandedness, some ended up being relieved so they can get it before it lapsed, and others did it on their own time, and so we cleaned that up to be consistent and fair across the board, and it's done on their own time, and we pay them 2 hours. They just show us proof that it occurred. Language to match the employee handbook on voluntary separation, and then the increases that we already discussed. So I've been asked, since we came to a tentative agreement, can we afford this? And my answer is, I don't think we can afford not to do this. As I mentioned in my memo to the commission, we have struggled, even prior to COVID, to hire. And now we're having a hard time retaining. And, this isn't unusual for the city. It's just worse for our department because of the part-time nature of our hiring. And so we've seen some recent successes, even before we've published these rates, but we are anxious to publish these and see if we can get some part-timers through the door. We still have 4 part-time positions that are vacant, so we are part of the way there, but not all of the way there. So there's no need for you to approve this. Are there any questions?
Question, if they test positive for COVID and out for their 5 days, that doesn't go against their perfect attendance, does it?
Well, that would be a great question for the HR director, wouldn't it?
Well, and perfect attendance gives me the shivers. God, we just went through this with the city. Department of Labor doesn't want a perfect attendance leave. We don't want to, and if you think about it, it's true. People get sick days because they need sick days, and we don't want to encourage people to come in sick. And it really exploded with COVID because of that. And so I know that our HR attorney, our attorneys, city attorneys, have, and I can say this because they made it public, that they feel we should not have PAL. Maybe we can find another, I'm hoping to find something that we can do that, but we don't want to encourage people to not, to come in when they're ill. So, and I do know that, I don't know, Greg, you're going to have to answer. Do transit go with the HR policy book?
Yes and no.
There you go.
Since Act 10, there's been a tremendous amount of confusion. We rely more heavily on the employee handbook now than we did before Act 10. We still have issues that are covered specifically in our labor agreement, and we also have our own work rules. So let me get back to your question, Kathy. Under the current circumstance, it is just straight up sick leave. If you're off sick, regardless of whether it's COVID or not, it's sick leave. And we have in my estimation, a pretty generous sick leave policy. Earlier in COVID, during the pandemic, we did have a policy on the book that did not penalize you for using sick leave for COVID. That is not the case currently.
Yes, that's correct.
The CDC has also changed the guidelines recently so that even if you're positive, so long as you wear a mask, you can report to work.
Yep.
So it is entirely up to the employee at this point.
Right. Yeah, there's no quarantine
Yep.
requirements anymore.
My other question is, this doesn't have anything if hours change or service changes and work a Saturday?
No, none of that is in the labor agreement.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. We don't need action on that. It's been acted on. Number 6, discussion and possible action on Metroride staffing, hiring and retention.
So I provided a somewhat lengthy description of our circumstance in my memo. So I'm not going to read it verbatim, but so we've struggled to hire for quite some time. You know, it predates COVID, and we've debated recently about whether or not our struggle has to do with the part-time nature of the job we're hiring to, or is it the wage that's too low? It's just hard to know. So one of the strategies we employed recently was we decided to make four part-time positions full-time positions, which entails full benefits, you know, the higher wage rate, the full package. We wanted to see if we can get some applicants through the door. And so in a recent recruitment, we got 7 applicants. And so I would suggest to you that that strategy was effective. We're now going back to the applicants that were not hiring initially to the full-time positions and asking if they're interested in part-time. Because we're about to publish the new wage rates. We don't have all the signatures on the agreement yet, so they're not official, but we're really close. And our strategy is, if we can get to a point where we're starting to attract part-time applicants with this new higher wage, which, by the way, is the same as the full-time wage, we're going to reevaluate whether we need the full-time positions we expand. Because if we can hire to part-time, that's all the work we have available. For these full-timers, we're having to find work for them, not having to do with driving. And so we're leaving vacant a utility worker position, and some of that work is going to go to drivers. During the pandemic, we've developed a routine of wiping surfaces down, and we've continued some of that. And so we're being as creative as we can, because we are attracting people away from full-time jobs to a full-time job. And so we can't now turn around and say, oh, sorry, it's 32 hours and not 40. We're doing our best to get them 38 to 40 hours. And that's what we described to them in the interview. But September 6th, we've got another retirement, and so we'll have a full-time position available. And depending in the coming weeks, whether we get some applications into part-time or not, we may or may not fill that with a part-time operator. So I'm encouraged to tell you that we are in a better situation than I thought we would be going into the school year. We attracted right off the bat a full-time, fully licensed operator from Eau Claire Transit. Sorry, Eau Claire Transit. That was just a matter of fortuitous timing. He was moving back to the area and was looking for a job and found one, and we were the beneficiary. We also attracted back one of our former full-time drivers who retired this spring. He's coming back as a part-time operator. Post-Act 10, he has to separate for a period of time before he can come back. That time has passed, and so we'll have him on the first day of school. We have offered 2 full-time positions to the new recruits, and we've offered a part-time position to a new recruit. But as I said, we are losing another full-time operator to retirement September 6th. We are short one more supervisor, and supervisors have been filling in, so I have fewer hands on deck there. And so we're similar to where we were in the spring when school ended, but just a little better off, and I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm encouraged. I think the things we've done so far have resulted in the desired outcome. So that's where we're at.
Good news. Any questions?
Are you going to advertise nationally for the mechanic position and when you retire? Or how's that going to work? I mean, it's pretty important positions.
Indeed. So the mechanic position, we are currently evaluating the department itself. We are trying to decide whether we want to hire a higher-end technician, or we want to move existing maintenance staff up in the order and hire perhaps a, mid-level mechanic. We're also looking at the workload currently. So our maintenance workload kind of ebbs and flows with the age of our fleet. And we've just had an infusion of new vehicles for the base fleet. And so we've seen a reduction in workload for our mechanics. And so we need to take that into account. And so we may hire a technician, or we may do something different. But, we're meeting individually with the remaining maintenance staff to get their thoughts. I've got a brand-new maintenance supervisor, and so, there's a lot of discussion. But in terms of the transit director position, that's really up to the city and not up to me. I have thoughts, but they're just my thoughts. So the last time the position was vacant, there was a debate between the Transit Commission and the mayor's office. And it was decided at that time that the Transit Commission hired and fired the transit director. I don't know if that still stands. I know there has been some, redoing of the ordinances, since then. It's a long time ago. So honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I know there has been some preliminary discussion about the .gov site that you're using to recruit HR director currently, and that resource has been used previously to do nationwide searches. So I don't know. That may be something on a future agenda that the Transit Commission wants to weigh in on. And even if it were determined that the Transit Commission has the authority to hire, you may want to defer if that's not something you want to do. So that may be a discussion that the chair wants to have with the our HR director.
When we get one.
Or I wouldn't wait until we have one.
Yeah.
Well,
I know, I guess this would be, we would have to, I think the city attorney would need to weigh in on what our ordinances are saying about hiring and firing within this commission, because every commission is different. And then the second thing would be, I think the mayor needs to weigh in. I know we had a brief discussion for some reason, and I know the mayor had weighed in on that. So I don't know. I think we can certainly see if this commission could weigh in, but I don't know if we would have the authority to do, a complete hire. I think it would have to still probably go through council and things like that.
I wasn't necessarily saying hiring, I just think it's a critical position. Greg's expertise for all the years he's been a transit director, we need someone in here that has experience running a transit system. Maybe I'm coming from it because I ride the bus, and it's very important to have a good service. And I appreciate all that he's done all these years.
Any other questions on the hiring? Go ahead.
Well, this is kind of going back to, I guess, when you were talking about finding work for the full-timers that we are bringing on, is that also include whenever the school year starts and the tripper routes come back? Or is that just kind of right now, and then once school starts, it's going to be a bit more busy?
Well, there are a couple issues there. So the reason we have hired to part-time traditionally is because that's where the work is. It's school tripper routes. And so when those routes don't operate, what do we do with these folks? Traditionally, what we've done is over the summer, we kind of stockpile projects for part-time operators, and we offer it. And we have had a mix of retirees who are looking for something to do and are perfectly content to be off in the summer, and then we have some that are trying to hang on and they want to go full-time. And so we tried to balance the needs of everyone, and we offer those utility sorts of tasks. For these new full-time drivers, it's now. When they come on board, they're going to need enough hours, that it's a full-time position and they can put food on the table. And that's our expectation. And so there's fueling activity, there's cleaning activity, there's painting. But you can only paint stuff so many times and wipe it down so many times. So we've had some initial discussion with other departments. And frankly, the challenge there is, A, they have to have the skill set to do whatever task is available. And B, the work has to be available that fits in with what we hired them for. And there's this restriction that has to do with the funding we receive. We can only spend these funds on transit activities. And so if I have them work in another department, I may not be able to pay for that activity. So there are some obstacles there, but we're having some discussion now about, how can we benefit other departments and fill out their hours. And that's why I say, if we can introduce that new higher wage, which again is the full-time bus operator wage, to a part-time operator, and we start getting applications, we're able to hire to part-time again, my goal would be to have more part-time positions and fewer full-time positions to match the hours that we have available. So we would go back to what is our old model. Until that time, though, we have hired 4 new full-time drivers, and we're going to find work for them. So this idea is not original to me. I was the one who proposed it, but it's really Madison Metro. Madison Metro did away with part-time for the same reason 5-6 years ago. And I said, so what do you have them do? Everything and anything to fill out their hours and make it meaningful as far as we're concerned. And so you can't make a bus move without a person. And so if it means it's a full-time person and they do other stuff, and that's how you retain them, that's what you do, and that's what we're doing. So.
Thank you. I also had one other question in regards to, on the website, I noticed under the employment opportunities, there was a video that was produced for Metroride that I thought was really well done and everything. How are we utilizing, I guess, that? Because that seems to be a very good resource in regards to showing people what the job is. And I think, that's the only place I'd seen it. I haven't looked for it specifically in other places, but.
Well, it's our intention, once the labor agreement is finalized and the wage is finalized, to promote it with that video. That's why we produced it.
Yep.
But until we work through the collective bargaining process and we change the terms, we felt it didn't pay to promote the old circumstance.
Gotcha.
And so we plan to push it out through social media and other means as soon as it's finalized. And that could be as soon as next week.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. Discussion of possible action on transit development plan.
I'm going to turn this over to Dave Mack. Take it away, Dave.
Hey, thanks a lot. I don't know if you see the screen in front of you. I've also handed out to you a copy of the presentation, just a few slides that I'll go through. Just for those of you that may not know me or who's watching elsewhere in the world. My name is Dave Mack. I am the director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Wausau area, also the planning manager for the county's Conservation Planning and Zoning Department. I was here back in May, I understand, talking to you about the plan and how it's transpired. Since that time, our consultants, RLS and Associates, have completed a lot of their work and have produced for us a draft document for you to see, which is in your packet for today's meeting. Hopefully you get a chance to go through some of that. A lot of fine detail that I'm sure Kathy's already read. Cover to cover. I knew it. So, just going to take a couple minutes to just walk through with you more of what is considered the recommendations or the scenarios of development that the consultants have put together for the plan. And then I think I'm going to pass it on to Greg, who can talk to you a little bit more about the future in going after the ability to take care of some of those recommendations. So in the plan itself, they've created, and I'm speaking for them, but it's been a kind of a collective process where in the beginning of this whole planning process, we created an oversight committee of local expertise, if you will, to kind of help shepherd this planning process. Chair has been a part of that. Kathy's been a part of that. Greg has too with his staff, and also the mayor has been a part of it as well. So we've, in the county staff and municipality representation from both Rib Mountain and Weston were a part of that committee. And the school district, thank you. Appreciate that. So we had some good insights from people, and they brought a lot to the conversation over the last 9-10 months or so since we've been working on it. So the first thing that I want to talk about, Greg, if you want to go to the next slide, is there were 3 scenarios that they created for development potentials for the area. Now, this is a plan that's done every 5 years. And I know this is technology for Greg to use, so that's, while you're, oh, I'm sorry, you're there, okay. I was going to mention that if you're struggling with that, I can segue by saying 20 degrees now is 40 degrees in the winter, just so you know. So be ready for that when you start. So, okay, so, sorry. Potentials for us. 3 scenarios that they came up with. The first one, improve and expand Metroride within the city of Wausau. It's looking at the functions and the service provided within the area that you're already currently providing service in. The second scenario, and I'll get into detail on some of these here. The second scenario is to expand transit into the outlying communities in the metro area that have been identified for people that would like to see transit in those. Most specifically, Rib Mountain, Rothschild, Schofield, Weston, and those 3 communities have had service in the past. And the idea is to look at how we can bring back service to those communities in the future. And then the third scenario is one where the consultants have put together some opinions about how we may be able to find funds to be able to support additional expansion potentially into other services or other services within Wausau, but by doing so, change the structure of some of our service that we have. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too in the future here. So scenario 1 is to expand and improve services within the Wausau area. It's broken up into 3 different kind of categories. One is technology enhancements. The other one is fare structure, fare media, and then the third one would be actually service expansions in the Wausau area, which would be more of the hours and areas of coverage that we have for service at this point. So the next one, Greg. So in technology enhancements, we've got a number of things that have been identified for us. On this first page here, you see that for the ability for the bus to actually transmit its arrival information using smartphone technology, computer technology. But from thinking about this, it's really about placing GPS equipment on all of the buses so that we know where they are. Once you have that in place, then you can do a lot more things that we'll talk about here in a minute, that you can really identify where the bus is, where it is on the route. You as a user can identify where you are in relationship to where that bus is so that you can plan your trip to get to the bus and continue your trip after the bus. And so all of those things that are necessary for being able to plan trips and utilize the system a lot more efficiently can be done by knowing where those buses are. And that's the idea that we would take with this one component of providing GPS on the buses and having the software in place to be able to manage that from a system management perspective. The next transit technology enhancement component would be the ability to use change the fare structure component using some kind of technology or smartphone potentially component. Being able to do this online is a benefit to a lot of people. Being able to associate an account with like a credit card account or a debit card account with the technology so that you can get on the bus with a smartphone. We talk about using a QR code reader on the bus so that you could just show your phone to the to the reader, and then you're on with the acknowledgement of payment. But also then we also have the capacity to then use other means to pay, which would be like a gift card or card components that you could add monies to. If you don't have the smartphone technology, you can get a hold of these cards when you buy, like you would buy now, the monthly passes, and then you could utilize these cards to get on the bus and use that same kind of reader potential that we have available. So there's a lot of different types of means to make payment for the service using different technologies at this point. Another enhancement for the technology could be the idea of having an onboard bus stop announcement. This would be the idea that based on the bus knowing where it is and the software that goes along with that, it would be able to announce to the passengers of the bus where the next stop is or the next major stop would be. Beneficial for the visually impaired or those that just don't know the area very well. You may know a street, but you don't know what might be around it. So this announcements of this type can be very beneficial to the ridership. Part of that concept could be that we have an external speaker system to the bus where you could be announcing the route that's coming, that the bus is on, and then the direction it's going, if it's heading back to the transfer center or not. These kinds of concepts are things that are being looked at from the U.S. Department of Transportation to kind of comply with the ADA requirements. And so those are some things that we really want to take a look at in the future to provide those services and amenities to the ridership. The next page I have is some additional enhancements from technology. I did talk about the QR code readers. Sounds like they're not very expensive. Credit card kind of payment systems maybe have a little bit more involvement with them on the bus themselves, but they're available, and it's something to be able to potentially look into, is just utilizing those types of cards instead of using a smartphone technology to make payment. Another enhancement could be an automated passenger counter system. Right now we have the drivers taking count and taking care of that information. This would be an automated system so that it automatically goes into a database so that management can utilize that information for its reporting requirements and just management of the system a lot better. We don't have to deal with trying to get that information from all of the drivers. And then a couple other enhancements that could be available could be software that can help with routing. Depending on how the system is being created in the future, that type of technology is there, especially if you have the GPS component to that, so that the management could start doing some of that planning for different routes and figuring out where there's ways for us to make things better. And then ultimately, some of the amenities that people have been asking for is Wi-Fi on the bus. Those are things that make that bus more attractive to the riders. And maybe you have the ability to get people that are going to utilize those services while they're riding in lieu of getting in their own car and making the choice to ride bus because they have that amenity that they can use. So that's really kind of the list of technologies that are being entertained for a part of this plan. The next kind of part of this scenario number one is more of a fare structure or fare media change. Part of the concepts that they've come up with is the idea of creating a weekly pass. Right now we just have the monthly pass and buying the cash or tokens that we use. This weekly pass would be able to potentially give people the ability to have unlimited trips for the week. Purchase these passes just like you would anywhere else. But then there's also a concept of having a pass, the weekly pass, capped at a certain amount, where you would pay as you go until you get to that cap amount or that weekly amount, and then you would have to not have to pay any more beyond that level into the future. And of course, some of those technologies are all based on the need for having some software as part of our technology process. Then the third option or the third component of this scenario number one, enhancing the city's involvement, is that of expansion into the city. This one is really extends more about the hours and then the service area itself. First one that we've listed here is the extended hours of service. This would be extending that service into the evening at some point in time, where you may talk about trying to capture all of the second shift type work, or you may try to get to a point where you're able to enhance the local retail establishments with service to when they typically close in the evening. All of those things could be talked about as expanding the hours of service during the day itself. The other side of that would be potentially creating service on Saturdays. That's another component of that expansion of hours. We did used to have service on Saturdays, which is not here now. And so those are options that are going to be available for you to talk about into the future as part of this, as how we develop the system into the future. Greg talked a little bit about some of the problems that we've been having with employment, and Saturday service also adds a component to that where we still have to deal with people in providing that kind of service, which is outside of the normal, Monday through Friday realm that we're in right now. Microtransit zones, those are demand responsive type services. Those also can be used to extend service in the evenings where you don't have a fixed route that goes to certain areas, but you have an on-demand call for a ride. They'll come and get you. It can link up to the fixed routes, or they can provide service within the city itself under certain scenarios to provide service in those hours where you may not have as much demand, but you have the ability to still provide service to people in the community. And then also we've got shared ride component potentially in going into areas. It would be more of a demand responsive type of a system, but we do not have any service that out towards the West Industrial Park. So providing some kind of a service out there beyond the idea of having a fixed route in that direction is another option for you to be taking a look at in the future to see how we can maybe accommodate some of the trips or riders that would want to go out to that west part of the community. So that's scenario one, and doing things within the city. The second scenario is all about extending service to communities outside of Wausau. Like I said earlier, we've had service in Weston, Rothschild, Schofield in the past, so that's part of the concept that's been talked about quite a bit in looking at service outside of the city. The main concept right now, based on talking with the public, they would like to get to Rib Mountain. Most of the retail in the area is in the Rib Mountain area, or a lot of it anyway. And so getting to and from Rib Mountain has been one of those areas that the current ridership would like to see. So creating a route, a fixed route to Rib Mountain is one of those ideas that's in there. Maybe having something that transfers from the G route, maybe at the county market facility in that area, could get you down into Rib Mountain. The other idea for Rib Mountain would be to maybe have a demand responsive, kind of a microtransit type option where you would send vehicles down into Rib Mountain, where they would do a kind of a curb to curb type of a scenario where they just drop people off near where they need to be. So that's kind of a hybrid type of a situation. Going into Schofield and Weston is another option. Right now there's quite a bit of talk about utilizing service by a couple of large employers that are in Schofield and Weston, mostly along the Ross Avenue corridor. Greenheck and Crystal Finishing are the two companies that are always looking for employment or employees, and so they're struggling to get people there, and we would love to see a lot of people from Wausau get out there with some service. So that's being addressed in this component of the plan. And then also there's another option where you could maybe potentially create a microtransit zone that would utilize more of a demand responsive service to get people in that area in lieu of a fixed route service that might go that way. Yes, ma'am.
So microtransit, transit routes, so those are just like, does that mean it's specific just Can
It's
you
an
just-
area mostly. It's mostly like a van service.
Okay.
Like we would have paratransit type service where you would call and you would ask for a ride. It would come and get you at a location, take you to another location in a zone or an area of the community.
So when that's listed on here,
Mm-hmm.
would that be for like more groups of people or one person at a
It could be
time?
anything. It could be one at a time. It could be, like we mentioned here earlier about going out to the industrial park. It
Yeah.
could be a shared ride service where you would get in with other people in the van and they would drop people off along their way to a certain destination.
And would that be, so would that be like a van or something
It could-
smaller
yes.
use?
Could be, yep,
Possibly?
yeah.
Okay.
Typically, it would be a smaller vehicle, yes, like a van, not a large bus.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
So, okay, now where was I? So, so that microtransit zone kind of concept can be utilized and thought about in a lot of different places within the area. Part of our conversations with the consultants in developing this is the idea with microtransit is that when you get to a point where you're servicing or you're providing rides for about 7 or 8 people or more, you're better off probably creating a fixed route in that area. It's very labor intensive to have one driver with one person in the van. It costs a lot more. It's a very expensive service. So your fixed route service is actually going to be your cheaper service. And so you got to be thinking about how you're delivering this. But it's being done in other areas. So it's definitely concepts that in the planning process we want to go through in the next few years to talk about how to deliver service in other areas of the community beyond just the fixed route service. So then the third option or the third scenario that was brought up in the plan is that of the service reductions. The consultants have been hesitant in bringing this to be a part of the plan. I know that there was a lot of discussion over the last few months regarding this with the oversight committee, and I know Greg's weighed in on this quite a bit. It's the idea that you would combine routes currently in existence in order to save money overall, and then use that savings money to fund new services somewhere else. Like in what I've got on the slide, combining B and D together, and then maybe streamlining G and I a little bit, and then maybe extending H. All of those concepts would be able to save some dollars, and then you might be able to provide a route to Rib Mountain with that money. Okay, because money is one of the ideas that it's difficult to come up with the funding to fund some of these routes. The drawback with this particular process is that you are looking at changing the headway for the service from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And so it really changes the way people look at when and where the bus is going to be available to them at the stops that they're looking for. We would provide basically 3 routes in a 2-hour time frame instead of now we provide 4. And that's how you create your savings. But if you're trying to get somewhere at a certain time, you may be off by 20 minutes because of that difference in time, or you could be off by 40 minutes, depending on. So you may have people that are sitting in the cold waiting for a bus for up to a half an hour, waiting for a bus they thought was going to come in 5 minutes. So those are things that the ridership of the community needs to learn if you were to implement a system like this. But what this is saying overall is that there are other approaches to providing service that can get you additional service that people are looking for in the community. If people are really trying to get out to the Rib Mountain area with service, and it's hard to fund something like that right now, some cutbacks on some of the other routes in the community could be a way to do that. And that's the things that you all need to have at your disposal, all of that knowledge, so that you can make decisions in the planning process for your service in the future. It's not necessarily being advocated for right now, but it's ideas that the consultants and I think the oversight committee agrees that that these ideas should be brought forth to you so that you have what you need to make decisions in the future. In the next couple of years, 5 years or so, we'll probably end up starting another process of doing another plan like this. think this might be the 5th one that Greg and I have been working on together, if I'm not mistaken. So, yes,
I didn't turn that light on, by the way, it just went on.
It just popped on?
I don't know, yeah.
I didn't do it.
Great.
But,
Maybe.
I think there have been some problems with this one, so, but anyway, have other municipalities, last I knew, they hadn't expressed a lot of interest.
You mean communities in the Wausau area? The outlying communities of Wausau, yeah. There's interest. It's interesting. The conversations that have been had over the last 9 months or so, 10 months that we've been planning this process is similar to what's gone on in the past years and past plans that we've developed. A lot of it revolves around the funding, how it's going to get paid for by the communities. And the fact that we, by state statute, or no, is it federal? We need to.
State statute.
It's stat, yeah. We need to have agreements with those communities in order for us to go across the border into that community. There needs to be a cost share agreement. It doesn't matter who pays for the cost share. It's just that we need those agreements. And so the communities are hesitant to get involved in these agreements if they don't have the funding available to them. And so there has been some hesitancy by the communities to get involved at this point. So we're looking at trying to figure out a way to fund these things, these options that we have available to you that are in the plan. But a lot of it is just understanding the need for transit, the desire to have transit. Does the community want transit? All of those questions need to be taken up by those individual communities. And we've had contact with all of them. They've been a part of the oversight committee, and contact from our consultants. They've talked to these communities through the whole process. It's just trying to get that buy-in, if you will, from those communities.
I have a question. Have we talked to the people in the industrial park, Great Lakes Cheese? They come to mind, I was there last week. Yeah, well, that's, across the street. I know Great Lakes Cheese, they do part-time during the day for moms, and they have different hours and different needs. They run 3 shifts, but that's way out there.
Right.
I mean, I was like, wow, that's a really long way.
That's as far as it gets.
Yeah, so, and the ones back towards Wausau as well, we have Line Tech, and all those, transportation is an issue. Have we approached them at all about this ride share? When I talk to them individually through my other employment that I do, it's like, well, yeah, we want to do this, but I want to know, have they raised their hands at all about will participate?
In this particular planning process, I don't know that we've spent a lot of time talking to them. We did have conversation with Great Lakes Cheese. They were part of a focus group scenario, or a meeting with other larger employers within the area. Crystal Finishing was there, Green Heck was there, North Central Tech was there. The Chamber was a part of that committee, or that meeting. So there's been conversations. I know that Great Lakes Cheese identified the idea that they've actually, they have their own van program where they're actually picking up and dropping off people that work there. They're going and getting them. Crystal Finishing was in the process of talking about purchasing their own bus with a driver and going around the community and picking up employees to bring to their facilities. So there's potential with those employers. It's just a matter of engaging them and getting them to be on board. A lot of them are willing to spend some money potentially. It's just getting that. Go ahead.
Well, it's, I think, a little more than that.
Yeah.
Most of these employers are regional employers. And so if they're outside the region that we serve, there isn't a role for us to play. And so getting the neighbors to participate in our program is a major big deal. I've had some conversation with Industrial Park Tenants Association in the past, and their reaction is, well, you realize we're regional employers, right? Why don't you serve the surrounding areas? Well, because they don't participate. And so, it's more difficult than just coming to an agreement with those employers, establishing that they would like it. We've got to get the partners involved in the process. And so
And part of the industrial park concept is the shift work that
Right.
happens there, and that it doesn't fit well in with the service provided right now with the system.
Yep.
And so they're reluctant to get in on board when you may be able to get somebody to their facility on the system for a second shift, but you can't get them home. And so there's definitely some complications to this whole thing. But there's been conversations for years about some of that industrial park concepts. But now, just recently, the conversations have been moving towards the kind of the what's happening in Schofield and West and some of the employment issues that they have there too. So I just got one more slide for you. And it's just letting you know that you have the draft plan with you now. We're going to be presenting this to the MPO at their September meeting in the draft form. We're also then going to be going to do some public engagement. We're going to have some public meetings in September, probably the week of the 19th, I think we're talking about right now, with the hopes that we can get comment and solidify that into the document as best we can, and try to bring something to you in a final format in October. So I think that's about it from me, unless you have any other questions. It's been a great process.
I have one question about scenario 3. So whenever you're talking about making those cuts so that we can find room in the budget to supply a new route and something like to Rib Mountain, and the cost shares and agreements have to be set up with the other municipalities.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the cost share could literally be, if the city of Wausau is approaching Rib Mountain and saying, we will fund this, we just want an agreement so that we can get people to Walmart or to Barnes & Noble or wherever to their jobs.
Sure.
That is a possibility. It's not that, Rib Mountain doesn't have to contribute something
Correct.
unless they want to.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, under your scenario, I would be hard-pressed to think that Wausau is going to pay for
Right, yeah.
all
yeah.
of that.
But, yeah, exactly.
But it's the idea
point
that,
of scenario
in the
3.
past, we've had businesses pay for part of that local share to get into the other communities.
Right.
And so that is a component that can happen.
Right.
It's just conversations and making it all work,
Yeah.
And that's what the statute says. It could be the municipality or another entity.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And all the communities understand that. They know that component. It's just now trying to figure out how to get something established that they can grab onto and want to do.
Right, because it seems like from the previous, even reading through the previous plans over the years, obviously the demand and desire is there.
Yeah.
Just a matter of,
You bet. Yeah.
paying for it.
I've had conversations with Greenhack, with their DEI employer, in HR, and I think she was new, and she said, why don't we have a bus? What do we need to do? And I said, you need to talk to you need to talk to Schofield. You need to talk to your, city leaders and have them, people, as much as we talk about the need and what the law is, it is very misunderstood.
Yeah.
Very misunderstood. They, I get a question every day, why can't you just drive the bus to Target? Why can't you just do that? So, and we keep talking about it and educating, but it still isn't.
Well, hopefully the plan will help talk to the communities about some of this. We'll get this out for everybody to see and maybe make some headway in that realm. But other than that, there's plenty of things that are available in this plan that you can do to enhance the service that you have in the city right now, that could be beneficial in the next few years.
So what's the role of the Metro Mpo in this? Because the mayors
Right.
mayors are there.
Correct.
Their political leaders from those surrounding metro areas are there.
That's correct. This is going to be officially their plan. This is an MPO plan that we do for the metro area. It's just that we need to be using your service because you're the provider in the area. And we
So the
focus on
political
service.
leaders are hearing the results of this and
Yes.
know the concerns of their constituents also.
Sure.
So,
Then it's up to them to make decisions on in those individual
I mean,
communities.
they're at the table.
They are at the table, yes. And, you know, mayor is a part of the commission. All of the leaders for Weston, Schofield, Rothschild, Rib Mountain, they're all at the table when they hopefully will adopt this plan. So hopefully they then take this back to their communities and have conversations about transit themselves so that they can then come forward and talk to you about their desires for transit. So that's the relationship, I guess.
Well, I mean, this is what this is what a metropolitan planning organization should
Correct.
be doing. It is it's a metro issue.
Yes. And it's a metro issue, and we're obligated to provide planning support for those concepts, which is transit in the metro area, which is what this plan is. Hopefully, the leaders of those communities will take this plan and do something with it. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay.
I'll be back whenever you want me.
Sounds great. We are now on adjourn, I wanted to bring up before we adjourn, go ahead.
I wanted to kind of talk about what we're planning to do for the next year, what's possible,
Oh,
in light of the fact that we're in the budget process. First of all, the timing of the plan is not ideal. We would have preferred these recommendations months ago, perhaps, so we could work toward incorporating them into our 2023 budget. Our budget was due 2 weeks ago, and I'm not done with mine. However, the only way, under the current budget process, I can put forward any of the service recommendations would be to provide them as a supplemental proposal to the budget, because the budget directive currently is existing circumstance, and so that's what my current budget revolves around. We don't currently have neighbors wanting to move forward with any sort of anything at this point. And so, as Dave said, we are left with kind of working with the service that, within the city of Wausau. We do have capital funding available to pursue the technology. And I would love to do any and all of it, but we'll have to sort through exactly how we approach each of those areas. But the good news is we have a separate grant for fare box replacement. We have a pot of money that unspent from the CARES funds. We have an allocation that we've not even applied for yet for the American Rescue Plan. So we do have capital funds available. So I would propose in the next few months here to come up with a capital plan that we can move forward. And those funds, just so you know, are 100% federal funds. So it will fund these projects at 100%. So that's the good news. The bad news is kind of sorting through all of that and deciding exactly what GPS looks like. There are many different forms. So that will be coming forward. The question I have for you today is in terms of service and budget for that. My concern with moving forward with any of those scenarios has to do with staffing. Although I said early in the meeting, I see a light at the end of the tunnel, we've just made offers. We don't have any new people on board yet. I think our hiring challenges will continue. And we're also coaxing people away from other jobs by portraying a Monday through Friday schedule. And so whatever we do, if it's adding service on a Saturday or so on, there will be a transition involved with that, and it's going to affect our current employees. And I think it's going to take time to manage that. When we eliminated Saturdays, we lost employees because it was a third of their work hours. They couldn't afford to work for us anymore. we'll have a similar fallout when we move to a 6-day schedule from a 5-day schedule. And my preference would be to stabilize our workforce first and then plan toward what do we do next. And so, you know, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. The budget will have to be submitted in the coming weeks. And so tell me what your thoughts are.
I ride the bus every day, almost every day, and I do not want to lose drivers. So I guess I would like to keep the service where it's at and do the technology part and the ADA shelters and look forward down the road. And some of the technology where it could automatically count who's on the bus and maybe would have data of where they get on the stop. So that could be used down the road. We can't afford to lose drivers. That's just my concern. Oh, go ahead.
So would you say that in recruiting right now, it would be easier to expand more hours within Monday and through Friday than adding Saturday? Like, would that be an easier grade into, you know, expanding more to more days?
Perhaps. It really kind of depends what you're looking to add. Evening service perhaps would be easier, I think, than Monday through, or Saturday service. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Or even limited, like, because I think even talking about a pilot program, so limited Saturday service, if it's something that instead of going more through the neighborhoods, it was going just down commercial lanes so people could get downtown or something like that.
Well, we've done limited Saturday service before, so we know what that looks like. I don't know what scenario we would choose. We've talked about demand responsive. You know, that's what Microtransit is. That's what our paratransit service currently is. My personal opinion on that is that ridership on a Saturday is going to be too much for Microtransit or demand responsive service. So I still think you're talking about, you know, some sort of limited fixed route service, you know, maybe fewer routes, maybe the combined route scenario they talk about here is a Saturday scenario perhaps. But again, that would have to be planned out and we'd have to, you know, figure out what that looks like. And that should happen between when the budget is adopted and the next budget. You know, January through July is when that planning should occur. We're in the budget process now and it's overdue. So that planning really hasn't occurred. It's an idea at this point. There are no concepts on paper. There is no costing. There's none of that. And so if we were to move forward and put it as a supplemental request, there's going to have to be some work done really quick.
Would you also have to do a supplemental request for the federal funds?
No, for the state and the federal funds, we would just have to, by, I think, November 15th, have a plan developed and ready to go in a grant application.
Gotcha.
So the window isn't between now and, say, January when we would start a service. It's between now and November 15th. And so we would have to go from concept to whatever it is, you know, staffing projections and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. When does the CARES Act and rescue money need to be spent, and are we allowed so much, or once the city spends it, it's gone?
Well, I will present to you in the, you know, in upcoming meetings, a summary of what funding is available, and also we'll take a look at the technology. But the CARES funds, we applied for all of our CARES funds, which at the time was $3.1 million. And we allocated it all toward operating assistance. And we can amend that grant and reallocate those funds for any purpose that's appropriate for that funding source, which is pretty broad. we put it, we basically parked it in operating assistance so we could use it for other things later. But we have been drawing from those funds. We used $850,000 in 2020. We used, I think, $800,000 in 2021, and we'll use a lesser amount than that in 2022. And then the plan is to kind of taper, like use 400,000 for next year. But we somehow have to wean ourselves off of that because it's one-time money. When it's gone, it's gone. And the reality is the city has benefited by using less levy dollars toward transit because we're spending these dollars instead. And I've been sounding the alarm the last two budgets saying, okay, this is great, but we need to transition back to the levy. And so there's going to have to be about $1 million earmark for transit in the next budget. And so we'll see if we're ready for that. I personally think it's going to be a really tough budget. So I think adding anything is going to be tough. But that's what supplemental requests are for. The American Recovery Funds, that is a lesser amount, and I can't for the life of me think of the total off the top of my head. But we've not applied for those funds yet. You had the option to, and the CARES funds have no expiration date. There was you had to apply for them by a certain date, but they're awarded and there's no end date, but when they're gone, they're gone. The American Recovery Funds have to be applied for by, I think, the end of 2023. And so we've not applied for them. We're not in a hurry. For my own peace of mind, I'd love to apply for them by the end of the year. But, there's, once they're awarded, then there's a longer timeline. You have until the end of 2026 to spend them. So long as we meet the award or the application timeline, we've got plenty of time to spend. So that's the good news with these funds. Now, the bad news with these funds is there have been a lot of awards of transportation funding recently, and the departments that handle those funds are really backed up at this time. I tried to submit an operating assistance application last week, and they wouldn't let me submit it. I have to wait till November. That's for 2022 funds. Unless it's critical, you need them right now. They're basically triaging and deciding what they'll accept. Because they all have to flow through the Department of Labor that reviews them for labor protections, and they have a 30-day turnaround. So they're only allowing submission of so many grants at a time. And so the end of the story is I have to amend these grants in order to pursue these technology projects. And the last grant I amended took 6 months. So this will be a process. So we'll start with identifying which technology projects we want to move forward with that will fit into the funding we have available, and then we'll start down the process to grant amendments. And I think my successor will be pursuing the actual technology procurements. So I just wanted to lay that out for you.
So the technology that, that we have been talking about, how far do you think down the road that would be when we decide, or you decide, or whatever, you just give us your recommendations of which to pursue?
Well, I think we can start working on the procurement documents. The consultant has done some footwork for us, and so, we're not starting from scratch. We'll be able to do a little more research. And the grants, I think, will have what's called pre-award authority. So once we've submitted the application, then I think we can move forward with the procurement early next year. So the process itself, from start to finish, I would guess would be about a year. Technology takes a while. Once it's awarded, then they've got to install and train, and so the real challenge with technology nowadays is it happens so fast that by the time you get all the bugs worked out, the industry's on to the next
Yeah.
thing. And so it's frustrating. And the other part of the technology we have to be cognizant of is there will be support fees and, operating expenses that go along with this. So it's not as simple as, oh, we have the capital money, let's buy it. We're going to have to incorporate in our operating budget the support fees, and some of that stuff isn't cheap. So we'll have to go into that eyes wide open. That'll have to be part of the procurement. They'll have to tell us, what are your support fees before we award.
Any other questions, concerns? Okay.
January 4th is Rosa Parks, and it's Transit Equity Day. And last year, we did a proclamation, the Transit Commission brought it forward to City Council. And I'd like that on the agenda sometime. I was on a
Okay.
call.
Future business?
Future business.
Done.
Anything else? Otherwise, we are completed, and I can take a motion to adjourn. Nobody? Motion?
And I'll second.
Okay, and we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.